Welcome to our podcast. This is Real Talk with Mary Contrary and Starfish. All right, everybody, welcome to Real Talk with Mary Contrary and Starfish. So we're continuing on with our 2025 mandate for leadership because, of course, there's just so much to this 922-page document that we have a lot to talk about. So in this episode, we're going to examine the critique of diversity, equity, inclusion. So the DEI initiatives in the 2025 mandate for leadership. So today we're going to discuss how these efforts intend to promote fairness and address systemic inequities, are how they're being resisted and undermined in various sectors. So this episode, we're going to kind of explore the document's claims. We're going to compare them to external research that Starfish has done, and we're going to highlight any key quotes and identify any factual discrepancies as we move along. So, Starfish, I give you the floor.
All right. Well, to be honest with you, this episode is not super fun to talk about because it's really difficult. It's so difficult to talk about it, So in the mandate, there's a lot of references to DEI. And of course, we've all by now heard that, Trump used that word a lot, DEI hires, right? So diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they've recently added A for accessibility, which includes gender, age, all these things. But really what we're talking about is race for the most part. And we'll address gender issues in other episodes. But in this one, we're going to talk about race the most. So in the mandate, of course, they mention this many times. Here's a particular quote that made me chuckle. In 1979, the threats we faced were the Soviet Union, the socialism of the 1970s liberals, and the predatory deviancy of cultural elites. Cultural elites. This is a word they use throughout the document, cultural elites. I don't know what they mean by that. I don't know who that is.
I mean, doesn't that kind of sound like an oxymoron? Because that's like kind of what they are.
I don't know. I feel like they're thinking of the social justice warriors or something, maybe, or like it used to be the educated people, but I really don't know who they're talking about when they say that. Wow. But they said Reagan defeated these beasts by ignoring their tentacles and striking instead at their hearts.
Even though he's one of them, guys. Even though he's one of them.
He's a totally Hollywood educated person.
Oh my God.
That's on page 3. I mean,
have you noticed? I just want to make this comment though, in politics, and maybe I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, that's fine. But have you ever noticed how the celebrity politicians are the worst ever?
I mean, Trump is a perfect example of that. Who else?
Yeah, it's you have Reagan.
I mean, it was pretty good.
Oh yeah,
I like Franken.
I mean, there was Arnold Schwarzenegger too. I don't know about him.
I mean, he did cheat on his wife, so. But he is. He is at least.
They kind of all do, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, we have our own deviant, Mr. Clinton.
Oh yeah.
So here's some more fun quotes. Eliminate Marxist indoctrination and divisive critical race theory programs and abolish newly established diversity, equity, and inclusion offices and staff. So, of course, all of our institutions, especially in higher ed, I don't know about healthcare, but I assume you have probably, we now have an office of equity, DEI, or whatever they call it, equity, inclusion, whatever. We'll have a CDO, I think they call it. No, that's not CDO. It's like a CEO of equity and inclusion. We'll have an office. We had a whole office too. So it was not only a person who ran it, but they had a staff and they had a seat at the cabinet table. So, I mean, these are pretty big positions now. And I have some comments on that later, but that's what they're talking about. Did you experience that in your field too?
Not really, to be honest with you. I mean, they have HR in healthcare, but for what that's worth. But I don't think there's a specific that I know of DEI department or anything like that.
Huh. Yeah, they didn't have it in the they don't have it in the state governments either. So interesting, or the local governments. Well,
Yeah.
definitely higher ed. I mean, so this is big for high education in general. This is because it's talking about teaching critical race theory, right? So, and we'll talk about what critical race theory is in a minute. I just wanted to get through a few more quotes. So, basically enforcing of civil rights should be based on a proper understanding of those laws, rejecting gender ideology and critical race theory. And that was in the book as well, page 322. I agree. I don't think you guys understand it, is what I think I'm saying. And I've had many conversations with people who are liberal and conservative, and they don't know what critical race theory is. I didn't know what it was either. I had to learn about it, and that's the problem. That's precisely, I think, the problem is that nobody knows what the hell it is. And all we're trying to do is just add it to the curriculum like we would anything else. And it's just getting such pushback from them because they don't get it. So I thought that was ironic. We need to understand them. Yeah, no kidding. You do. Have you read them? So this is my last quote that just was really disturbing. That the Biden administration has pushed racial equity in every area of our national life, including employment, and has condoned the use of racial classifications and racial preferences under the guise of DEI and critical race theory, which categorizes individuals as oppressors and victims based on race. So you're the white people, you're the oppressors. These people are the black people or the Hispanic, they're the victims. That's what they think.
Wow.
I think when you learn the history.
Yeah.
I love how they say that we categorize them. Like we made this up, so we'll get into the history of this stuff. It's just craziness. Okay. So I think I have to jump to that section because it will really help to make jump to that.
Let's learn the history of all this.
So basically, race is not, I don't know if anybody knows, I did not know this, but race is not genetic whatsoever. There's no genetic component to race. We can't tell who's black, who's white, who's Asian, non-Hispanic, Hispanic, none of that. You can't tell by DNA. Okay. It is very odd to think about race like that. Like, wow, we definitely have different colors. So we can see how much melanin you have. That is not genetic necessarily. Although dark hair and dark skin is genetic. So is red hair, blonde hair, but dark hair and dark skin are dominant genes. So boring genetic stuff. But I think that is interesting to think about, that it's not really genetic. All the other demographics we look at it by, gender is obviously genetic. Age is not a genetic thing, but it's an easy thing to measure. Low income is also easy to measure. We have metrics for these. Trying to think of some other demographics. I mean, in higher ed, we have first generation and some other things like that. But for the most part, I was shocked to hear oh, wow, it's not really race. It's not really a genetic thing.
Mm.
So also, I
have a question, Starfish. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, please. No,
but what do you think race is by region though?
Yes. So what they're starting to realize is that it doesn't really matter. We can't ask you, are you black? Because somebody could say, I'm black, but they grew up in the United States. Or they could say, I'm black, and they grew up in Africa. Okay. So we have a lot of people in Colorado who come here from Kenya and the Congo and Nigeria, a lot of places in Africa. They don't understand the experience of the black people here in the United States, because there was no white people for them to be, there was no white people to treat them different in Kenya.
Right.
You know what I mean? So they weren't the minority there. They were the majority. So when they come here, they're like, I don't understand and identify with this experience that you guys had, not to minimize it, but they get it now when they come here and they stay here for a while, because they're definitely treated differently once they're here, for sure.
Right.
But but they don't get it at first. So I don't know if that answers the question.
No, that did. Because I felt
Okay.
like, even though it's not a genetic thing, but it's a regional thing. That's all I was saying.
Yeah, so we can ask by country, like where were you born? Which country were you born in, or which country were you raised in? Which country did you come from? It's really a hard question. It's not even that easy to ask people what their age is, because do you identify with this generation or this generation? Gender, do you identify with that gender or that gender? So in healthcare forms, they're starting to say things like, what's your gender or sex at birth or whatever, assigned at birth,
Yeah.
because these definitions are so complicated. And so that's my chief complaint about all of this, is that these definitions are arbitrary and they sort of came out of places that aren't great. Gender is one example, but race, the history of race is that essentially they're back in the day, way back, the term Caucasian actually originated from Johann Friedrich Blumenbach. I just want to get that right. Believed that the people of the Caucasus region represented the purest form of the white race. So basically they were like, hey, we're Caucasus. We're from the Caucasus Mountains. We're Caucasian.
Caucasus.
And
what region were they referring to with that? Like where on the planet?
The Caucasian Mountains are in the Middle East area. Yeah.
Really?
Interesting.
I would have never thought. I guess I would have never thought that. Huh.
Yeah, I know. I think, if you look at, let me just, Caucasus Mountains is specifically, it makes sense if by the Black Sea, the Caspian Sea.
Okay.
That's where people think Noah's Ark is, like Turkey area. So that makes a little more sense. I just needed a map to kind of visualize it. But yeah, it does seem like it's in, I'm not saying it's in Iran or Afghanistan. That's what we think of when we think of the Middle East.
Yeah, that's where my mind was going. And I'm like, I don't think that's right, Starfish. But yeah,
no, I know.
Yeah.
So they're on the western side of the East, the Middle East. But nonetheless, yeah. So originally they kind of had this idea, and then when they came over to the United States, they used that as a criteria for who should own land and who should not own land. So this was the Naturalization Act of 1790. So the Naturalization Act of 1790 restricted U.S. citizenship to free white persons or Caucasian people from the Caucasus Mountains. Reflecting early American racial attitudes. So this basically set the precedent for all racial restrictions in everything: immigration, home ownership, and land ownership was the biggest one. So you could own land if you were a person from the Caucasus Mountains, right? And so this country immediately started off right away with these rules, even with people who were here. They were like, what do we do? Like, we don't get the land, and it's very, very similar to the experience I think probably people had even after all of the laws were dismantled for like slavery, that you still feel a little bit like out of place. Like, okay, so now what do I do? I'm done being a slave. You've unenslaved me, but it's not like suddenly you get your own house and suddenly you get your own pile of cash. And suddenly everything's cool. So that is the primary argument, I think, of people who say that by now this should be over with and we don't need to give them any money, any special treatment or anything. So I think of affirmative action when I think of this. I think of affirmative action because affirmative action was one way in which you could easily demonstrate when you try to hire somebody. And a lot of people do this. They don't mean to, but they do. they will choose if they have two people that have exactly the same credentials, one's black and one's white, they will choose the white person every time if they can see that they're black and white. And so that's why like de-identifying applications and the EEOC has been so important for that kind of stuff. And so what affirmative action was essentially trying to say is if your business employees don't represent, especially government, if they don't represent your population in your state, something might be going on there. Some biases might be going on there. And we're going to need you to try and correct them. Now, it wasn't the best law the way it was written. I can honestly say that, but it just is what it is. It's just, you're obviously have some sort of bias and you're not bringing these people in to your organization.
Wow. Way to go, 1790. Like,
I know.
Like, how stupid. Like, let's just set us up for failure right from the start.
It really did. And I did not learn this when I was younger in high school and anywhere. I don't remember ever
No,
learning.
I did not. This was not taught history. This is like brand new to me, even.
Totally. And so this is what critical race theory is. And there's even a little bit more to it that I'd like to share. So in psychology, and this is where I think critical race theory fails, personally, and especially having gone through training myself, is that not the theory itself fails, but the way in which they're trying to enact it or to move it through. So I do a lot of change management work, with my industry and my skills. And what change management is like easing people in to change. Okay. So in psychology, we have this way of defining racism that's a little bit different than maybe what scholars of race would look at, how it would look at it. We see it as overt and covert. So there's people who are overtly racist. They're like, I don't like black people. I'm not going to hire you N-word. That's overt. They know what they're doing. They're racist. Yep. They don't care either way.
Yep.
Those people are definitely the ones we don't want, to work for us or maybe need a little bit of training,
Yep.
But we're not even talking about that. I think this is the hard part. This was so hard for me to figure out, was that we're talking about covert racism. And covert racism is kind of defined in two ways. It could be that you're covertly racist because you're very good at being racist and you don't want anybody to know, and you're going to do everything in your power to sort of take them down. I would probably call that the conservative movement. They're covertly
absolutely
doing it, very covertly, but it's almost overt. It's so covert. It's like almost like, geez, you're getting to be overt with this. I mean, Trump really brought it out with the wall and all this border stuff,
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And the Mexican cartels, the drug cartels.
Right.
Anyway, but really, the kind of racist because critical race theory, what they'll say is everybody's racist, almost exclusive. All white people are definitely racist. And they have these terms like white fragility, people who are white, they really don't take to this very well. They don't take to being called racist very well. And well, that's true, because nobody takes to being called anything like that very well. So I was told in a training that I was racist, and I was like, what?
At your
because
job?
Yes, in my jobs. Wow. I know, it's shocking, isn't it? And that's why I was like, whoa, guys, I feel like you're approaching this really inappropriately. So they're calling me racist. And, and then they're like, do you need time to process this? I'm like, I need time to figure out, I'm going to find another freaking job. This is insane. I can't believe you're calling me racist, And then I really got to thinking about it. And it's not this overt racism. It's not that covert racism. It's this other kind of covert racism where I don't even mean to be racist. But growing up in the towns we did, Mary Contrary and Starfish, we grew up in white towns, right? I grew up in a place where there's like one black family, one, and maybe like one Hispanic family. And I'm sure I know where you grew up, same sort of deal. They used to call our cities vanilla valleys, like we live in the vanilla lands. Well, so I am racist without meaning to be. Like, for example, I'm walking down the street and I see somebody who's black. I might move away a little bit more than if they were white. I don't mean to be like that. It's just, I'm not used to them. I'm uncomfortable around them because I haven't been around them as much or something like that. I got a lot more exposure as I got older and went to school, and worked at jobs with people who are of different races and ethnicities and disabilities and all kinds of stuff. But certainly growing up, and if you stay in that little bubble, you're going to be racist without even meaning to be.
Yeah, because I mean, don't you think, I mean, it's a learned behavior, right? Like it's something I feel like that's learned, like we're instilled fear.
We're instilled fear, and also we're instilled, I mean, inherently, other things are scary. Other people, it's
Right, like
like
the
these genetic,
unknown. Right.
the unknown. Yeah, our genetics are designed to protect us, and one way to protect us is, oh, you're not like us. Who are you? So if that's your initial reaction, okay. But if you, beyond learning that, if you learn about what you just did, and I said some pretty ignorant things when I was a kid. I think we all did. Like
Oh
I
yeah, I
literally
totally
one
did.
time said, I don't understand why they're so upset that we call them Mexicans. Like, speaking of, have you ever seen the movie Clueless? She says it in there, and I was like, I totally said that ignorant thing too. She's like,
Yep.
I don't understand. I don't speak Mexican. And she's like, I'm not a Mexican.
Oh,
She's like, why is she so mad? She's like, because she's from Venezuela. you know? And I'm like,
oh
what?
my
I
God.
don't get it. Like,
Yeah.
hello, Mexico is not a continent, people.
Right. Like,
so,
yeah.
so I really do think we learn, we live and learn, we grow, we learn. I learned a lot about race, and like that whole experience with people from other cultures, from Black cultures, who didn't understand the people who came from LA or Detroit, and they're like, I just don't get this. I don't get this experience that you guys have had. But then after a few years, they get it. They get it absolutely. And I think you and I experience it too as women. I certainly have. So these covert things that people say are overt, where they're
Oh
like,
yeah.
oh, a woman couldn't do that. Oh, can we get a man in here, please? Like,
Right. Oh yeah.
give me a break. Oh, what do you have your period? Oh man, that one just chaps my hide.
Oh yeah. Or
So,
like black jobs versus white jobs.
oh
So,
right.
you know.
Stop it with this. I
Oh
love it.
my
I love
God.
it. It's
Yeah.
just so I think when they say they don't want these DEI initiatives, and when they're a DEI hire, I mean, it sounds to me like they don't understand what those things mean. They just speak against them. But then I think, well, if they had the same experience I did, where I was called a racist to my face and told, and like then later coached about why I was racist and how I could be less racist, and you're just like, really, this is how we're going to do this though? I mean, I wasn't around in the 70s when women's rights were coming about, and I bet you they did the same thing. They called men outright, you know, you're anti-women, you're whatever. They call them feminazis for a reason. But really,
Right.
feminism just is the same thing. You're just calling for equality. It's not special treatment. So like on the campuses, we would look at our demographics and say, wow, we have in this region, we have 10% Asian, but for some reason at our college, we have 2% Asian. What is happening? Well, we want to create a little reach out group to figure out why we aren't able to tap into that Asian population, because our white population perfectly matches the demographics. In fact, it's a little higher, the breakdown of it. So we just want to make sure that the experiences for everybody are as equitable as possible. We want to make sure the outcomes are equitable too. I think I've heard a lot of people say that they want the opportunities to be equitable, but the problem is that if you don't make the outcomes equitable too, then what are we doing here? And that's not to say that you grade two people the same way, even though they didn't do the same level of work. That's to say, what do we need to do to get you to understand this material at the end? That should be the case for all of education. Nobody should be able to get a D. Nobody should be able to get a C and still graduate. What the fuck is that? Right?
Right.
Why don't we bring
Right.
everybody, make sure they learn it 100% before they are able to graduate? So all outcomes should be the same for all demographic groups too. Now we need to totally change the education system for that to work. But
Right.
I guess I understand people's this struggle is a very difficult topic. People hate talking about it. I don't even like talking about it. It makes me uncomfortable talking about it because I'm afraid I'm going to say something stupid. I'm afraid I'm going to offend somebody. But at the same time, I know as a woman what this experience can feel like. I can have a taste of it for people because these microaggressions that people have, it's just by looking at you. Oh, you're a woman. Immediately they reject you. Immediately they reject you if you are Black. And it's just that kind of stuff that we need to break down these, stereotypes about these people, about all of us. And then the other struggle I hear from people is saying, oh, well, there's poor white people too. I mean, why aren't we focusing on them? And that's absolutely right. And that's why I said we need to completely redo the system, is that it really doesn't focus on everybody who needs help. It focuses. So one institution I worked at, they were narrowly focused on race. And I was like, well, there's gender issues, there's age issues, there's income issues, there's first generation issues. Why are we only focusing on race? And that was a problem for everybody. Oh, there's LGBT issues too. And so why are we only focusing on one affinity group, if you will? But I think race was just the forefront. We just had a Black president. Let's talk about this. Let's bring it out in the open. I don't know. So I see the critiques, they make sense, but I also don't think they have all the information.
Okay. So how does this tie into the document? Like, what is there?
So the document repeatedly, and also I want to circle back to Trump. So Trump also says, and the document both say, we need to completely eliminate CRT. They say we will defund any school that tries to teach CRT. And that was part of the accreditation thing that we talked about too. Let's get rid of accreditation because accreditation is trying to push diversity and equity. Well, they're just trying to make sure that your school is serving its students equitably because you're serving public schools, they're just trying to make sure that you're not being racist in who you accept. And then that's why your numbers look so good. So basically the mandate multiple times calls for ending CRT in any way, shape, or form, taking it out of government, taking it out of every single, because they talk about totally reorganizing the government. Well, any DEI offices are gone, DEI staff all gone. And then anybody who wants any federal funding may not be forced to do DEI. So if you want federal funding, then the federal government can't force you to do DEI initiatives in order to get it. And if they decide to teach DEI on their own, Trump wants to block any federal funding going to them. And so Trump says that in his Agenda 47, for those of you who keep saying that Trump has nothing to do with this. In fact, his Agenda 47 very specifically says very similar things. It says NCRT for any, oh no, I can't find the quote. Fred. Well, it says NCRT for anybody who gives any money to any schools who are teaching it, basically.
So this
just disturbing.
It just sounds like we're trying to bring back like the Jim Crow laws.
Oh yes, I don't even think a lot of people know what that is.
Right?
Mary Contrary,
this was only like what 60 years ago that we had this, 70 maybe.
Yeah,
Jim Crow laws. So yeah, it's crazy to me that people it's just crazy to me anyway, like the education that's out there already, that we don't teach this kind of stuff in school.
I know. And so the fact that they're saying we're not going to give you money if you teach this is like, but wait, this is our history. It's history. Right. So then if you think about the monuments that they were all upset about, oh, you're taking history away. Well, this is history too, and you're trying to take it away.
I remember that. Right. Like they wanted, when they were taking down the Robert E. Lee statues I think down south in what was that, South Carolina, they were taking those
Yeah.
out. Yeah, and
Yeah.
everyone got upset.
Well, yeah,
So it's
because I
okay.
mean, we could talk about those at another time, but yeah,
Right,
it's
like, it's
okay
like,
for them to,
so
right.
you're okay to do that, but this, like, is just so weird, like, crazy to me.
Very
Um,
hypocritical. Very hypocritical. Very also, I just think they're scared of this stuff. I don't think they like it. I think that they honestly believe that it means they will be out of power. And frankly, it should mean that. It doesn't mean white people are not going to be in power, but whoever's in the majority does tend to be in power. It just kind of is the way it is. I don't know. Which
yeah,
is a lot of why they have the electoral college and things like that. But this is a really complicated web of a problem. Um, that's not easy, but just banning it and saying you can't, we're not going to give you funding is like, what? Okay, well, we need to teach this though. Like, people don't know this stuff. I didn't know it. And I was
right,
shocked that I didn't know it. Like, how the hell did I never learn this?
right. Yeah. Well, and this is why we're breaking this down for people, so to educate people on some of these, like, little deceptive things that they have in this document, so people have an understanding of what are they saying in this section, right?
Right. And it's throughout the document. So it's hard to pinpoint exactly where it is, but basically in each section, um, which we know that a lot of the people who wrote this worked for Trump and then subsequently worked for the Heritage Foundation, said things like, this is preventing us from doing our work. You're making it hard to do our work. It's dividing us more than it. But they, his cronies said it. So it's like, okay, well, give me some real data that it's not working, that people are actually feeling frustrated by it. Now, the only data I have is anecdotal data too, that people would come to me and say, actually, they wouldn't come to me. I would read it in all of the surveys because I got to do all the employee surveys. So they would just say, I don't understand this. I feel like it's not okay to be Christian here anymore. And I'm just like, oh, geez, it's not at all
Oh,
what's happening.
oh man.
Not trying
Yeah,
to anti-Christianize this place, although it is a secular public place, but they're
right,
like, I feel like if you're Christian, you're going to be treated differently. So some schools have actually added religion as one of the protected classes, that you are not allowed to discriminate on, like you don't want to make a Christian feel bad either, but it's like, okay, but the Christians are the ones making us feel bad about who we are, our basic. So not all Christians, but
right,
this is a white race thing, and it was our forefathers, so it is hard to say.
right.
Should we still have to deal with it? But we firmly can see it with Trump coming out. These people are all still there. Everybody's like, racism doesn't exist anymore. Really?
Ugh,
We don't have these problems anymore. Really? Hmm.
yeah, it's like
I think,
they want to go back to this weird, like, 1950s vibe.
oh yeah.
It's like that's what they want. It's like where the man does everything, the woman does very little, and the minorities are the servants. Like, that's what this feels
Right.
like.
Right.
It's like they're trying to turn America into a fucking plantation.
Hmm. Yeah, they enjoyed it that way. They were in power. They didn't have to work. Things were easier. Things were better, especially for men. I've actually met a lot of men who feel like they were entitled to a wife, entitled to a family, entitled to a nice job because they followed all the rules. I'm just like, wow, I've never felt that way. I've never felt like I was entitled to a
Oh,
life, but
no.
they absolutely feel like they're entitled to it
That's
just by
totally
being
crazy.
male. By
Wow.
being male, that's it. So I did want to add this. I found it. Jeez, I'm sorry, everybody. So on page 13 of Trump's 47 Agenda 47, number 6, knowledge and skills, not CRT and gender indoctrination. So Republicans will ensure children are taught fundamentals like reading, history, science is in there, crazy, and math, not left-wing propaganda. We will defund schools that engage in inappropriate political indoctrination of our children using federal tax dollars. So they will defund the schools.
Wow, that's crazy. Like you have to think our way or you're going to jail and we're defunding you.
You know,
Wow.
I remember during the bathroom ban thing that liberals were saying the same thing. If you basically don't allow people of any, I don't remember exactly how it was worded, but essentially it was like, we're not going to give you funding um, if you don't. And I just thought, ah, man, these are tough. This is tough because you're right when you say it the way Trump said. I mean, it sounds terrible to do that. At the same time, they're saying if you do not do it, we will also take away your funding. So it's like, gosh, we're just going to keep going back and forth on this, aren't we? We really need to sit down and talk about what CRT is and whether we legitimately think it needs to be in our curriculum, you know. But it's hard to debate with people who don't even want science in the curriculum at all. They don't want anything science
Exactly.
in there. So I'm
Right.
surprised that he put science in there. Hey,
Yeah.
history's in there too. You know what CRT is? History.
Right.
Do you know what the Naturalization Act is, Trump? I doubt it.
Yeah. I'm sure
So,
you'd ask him and he'd be like, never heard of it. Like that would be his
right.
response.
He hadn't heard of Juneteenth either, so we know he doesn't know about the Naturalization Act. So,
Yep. Yep.
so, so that's DEI and CRT.
Oh my
Crazy.
gosh.
That's
That's
the mandates. Yeah. And I just generally think you can just tell by their vibe that they just don't like it in general. I don't know. I don't even think them saying they won't fund it is that big of a threat. I think what they're basically saying is knock it off or else we're gonna send you to an island, you freaks.
yeah. I mean,
Ah,
wow. I just there's just so much to talk about
yeah,
in this.
yeah.
Starfish. Anyway, well, we're going to continue on, as we go through this document, but I think that was a great breakdown of some of the language throughout the document of the DEI and CRT. I think those are important terms to know, to understand what they're like trying to do. They're trying to cover up racism with little terms like that, and it's just crazy to me. So, anyway, well, we're going to dig a little bit deeper. This next episode, we're going to talk about some Trump ties to everything, because I think people should be informed about that, since he denies all ties to any of this. So anyway, so I hope you guys continue to listen, and I hope you all stay safe and stay informed. Thanks, everyone, for listening to Real Talk. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast wherever you listen. We look forward to having you on our next one.